welcome in. My name is Chris. This is Horns Behind Enemy Lines. I'm back. We're finally back on the channel, man. It's been a really long time since I've been able to come onto the YouTube channel here and kind of talk. Life got busy. Frankly, life got busy. You know, obviously I'm in a new space. Had to move across town. Still behind enemy lines. Still here in Oklahoma. You'll know if that changes. But yeah, I had to move across town. Things got kind of busy, so that's why I haven't been on here. But during the time that I wasn't able to keep up with the channel, Texas kind of went off and had a pretty good, successful little season, 2023 season here. You know, I think for this video, kind of talk about pretty much almost anything under the sun when it comes to Texas football. You know, recruiting, transfer portal, just some off-season thoughts. As we speak, as I made this video, they just started. The team just started the winter workouts yesterday or the day before. So that's obviously exciting news. We're going to go ahead and get into it here in just a second. But before that, just make sure to like this video. If you like the video, leave a thumbs up down below. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed, and share this page, friends, family, and whatnot. We're going to go ahead and get into it, man. You know, I think what stuck out to me, I think the most consistently over the course of this season was the fight and the finish that this team kind of had to offer throughout the course of the entire season. I think it showed up in really big moments. You saw this team kind of band together and really have each other's backs. These guys wanted it, and you could tell when these guys talked, with the media availabilities, when these guys talked, man, like you heard that angst kind of in their voice, especially guys that have frankly been through it. You know, your Jordan Whittingtons of the world, your Jalen Fords of the world, you know, that Christian Jones. You could feel that kind of angst in their voice. Like these guys wanted it, as well as everybody else. But guys like that, specifically guys that had been around for the lows, the very lows, the very low lows of Texas football. You know, those guys wanted it, and I think that mixed with Sark's kind of implementation of this culture that has been so longed for when it comes to Texas football. Kind of that both of those two things kind of mixed together, creating this beautiful kind of concoction of this fight and finish culture that has, like I said, has been missing for so long. When that winning culture is strong and when it's fortified, you know, usually you see that kind of permeate throughout the classes, you know. So hopefully looking forward a little bit, you know, hopefully that's something that kind of permeates. I think it will. Hopefully it kind of permeates, you know, and it trickles down through the ranks. Guys that are going to have to step up this coming season. You know, guys that are going to have to kind of take the reins. Your Quinn Ewers of the world. You know, guys that are going to kind of have to really, like, seriously step into that role and become, you know, bona fide leaders of the team. You know, looking back on the season, I think when you talk about the fight and finish of this team, you know, finishing out these really tough games, I do think it comes with a little bit of a caveat, a little bit of a caveat, because I think many times this team found themselves in situations that they had to it kind of ended up being a little bit of a dogfight towards the end of these games when it didn't have to be, because of issues that Texas was having. You know, let's face it, this team did in fact have a couple issues that never quite got resolved, and ultimately came back to haunt them a little bit, finding themselves in situations where, frankly, preventable situations. You know, I think specifically thinking about the Houston game, the TCU game, where we had to slug it out but it seemed a little bit preventable. Specifically, talking about kind of the play of the secondary. One of the biggest, if you follow this stuff really closely, most of you probably do. You're looking at alignment when it comes to like the corners and whatnot. So not necessarily the corners themselves, but schematically having them play. We're talking 8 yards off sometimes, and leaving the high percentage completions, wide open. Your slants, your stop routes, all that. We saw that in the Kansas State game a little bit as well. Finding ourselves in situations like that, that kind of stuff hopefully kind of gets addressed during the offseason. And then you talk about, debatably, probably the more frustrating issue that would pop up randomly is the red zone offense. The lack of execution, the lack of points that came out of that red zone offense at times. Specifically, it popped up a little bit more towards the beginning of the season, or I guess the midpoint of the season. Once again, the OU game, we'll get to that in a second. But I think that's something that absolutely needs to be addressed, because I think when this kind of stuff would happen, when you would see these issues kind of pop up in the middle of games, you're sitting there, your hair is kind of, as a fan, as a Texas fan, you're kind of sitting there with your hair on fire, and you're like, what in the world is going on? Like, why is this such an issue? And you get so frustrated. I myself, I get really, really frustrated. And ultimately, in these games, they were coming out with the victories, except for the OU game. We'll get to that in a second. They would come out with these victories, and you're sitting there thinking to yourself, okay, yeah, that's good, but kind of in the back of your mind, like at least in the back of my mind, I'm sitting there like, man, okay, like this is going to come back to bite us in the butt maybe at some point in the season. It might not be pretty. As far as the season overall goes, I think all of us, as humans, we love a good story arc, and I think this season, this specific season had it. The kind of ebb and flow of the season, and the highs and the lows of the season. I thought it was a beautiful story. I thought it was very cool to see. I think it all started with the Alabama game, obviously, as pretty much all of us know. Just absolute tone setter for the whole season. And that game in and of itself, the highs and lows, the kind of arc, the story arc that game had. But specifically as far as the season goes, kind of starting off with that bang, way up here, starting off on 10, and kind of riding that wave. With the Wyoming game, they're kind of having a little bit of that hangover for that whole game, and then kind of still riding that high all the way to the OU game. Probably, not just because we're here in Oklahoma, but probably one of the more frustrating games to watch, like, ever. Not just this season, but like ever. Just because, stop me if you've heard this before, but we're talking about another one of these situations where we absolutely have the more talented roster, the better coaches, quite literally everything aligned for us, and our guy, we just got beat. Say what you will about questionable calls during that game. Say what you will. Fact is, it resulted in a loss on the schedule, and there were issues that popped up in that game. Going back to the secondary, it would seem like our guys would sometimes get lost in coverage, and then the very, very big issue once again was the red zone offense. Specifically that very big red zone goal line stand that OU had. Being unable to protect Quinn at certain points in that game, but after that game, you're kind of sitting there like, okay, what now? Like, what now? And after that point, following that game, there was the bye week. If my memory serves me right, there was that bye week, and you're kind of you go into the Houston game, which was the first half of that game. Most of us remember the first half of that game is like, we're like, all right, and keeping in mind that it's Houston, so we're not, getting too excited. But first half of that game, you're like, okay, maybe everything's maybe they put it behind them really really quickly. Which I'm sure they did, but fact is, second half of that game got really interesting for, due to multiple reasons. The reasons that I said a second ago. Quinn obviously got hurt at a certain point in that game, and that came down to, the very last couple seconds. Jahdae Barron with the big pass deflection to end that game there. Just, and in that game going into the Kansas State and the BYU stretch where Malik Murphy had to play and came out with victories in both of those games, and kind of seeing what this what this team looked like without Quinn, and having to kind of rely rely heavily on the defense, specifically more so about in the Kansas State game. The BYU game, that was what it was. They pretty much dominated in all facets of that game. But in the Kansas State game, really having to rely on the defense. And obviously the massive final play of that Kansas State game, had everybody, all of us, on the edge of our seats. And then you get to the TCU game where it was Jonathan Brooks gets hurt in that game, and I think I speak. Let me just say this: I think I speak for most everybody when I say if Jonathan Brooks doesn't get hurt, man, you're probably looking at the Doak Walker winner, man. Not 34 yards, Ollie Gordon, but we'll just kidding. He's a good running back. He not against us though, not against this Texas defense. But I digress. The TCU game was another instance where we're looking good pretty much for the most part during that game. Quinn kind of coming off the injury, not looking his best. You could tell he wasn't 100% in that game. But them once again a situation where the opposing team, TCU, they made it interesting, mainly because of issues that Texas themselves were having, shooting ourselves in the foot. And then, the home stretch, the Iowa State game, with the whole drama that game presented. I think that was a very kind of cathartic win in a way. The Texas Tech game, more so, another very cathartic win given all the drama that game presented in the offseason prior, all that. And then the Big 12 championship game, obviously making it to that game, huge deal. I think that alone, kind of was the benchmark of this season. I think winning the Big 12 championship, I think was kind of the goal, and then after that, letting the chips kind of fall where they may. As far as that game goes, I was there. I was at that. I was able to. My dad and we were able to go to that game. Very thankful that I was able to go to that. Very last game in the Big 12. And then from that point going into the playoff, waiting that whole rest of the day was pretty fun. Waiting to see kind of where the chips would fall, and obviously Texas clinches the playoff berth, and they go on to face Washington, which we all know what happened there. Kind of talking about that game just for a second. I think that's where a lot of Texas's issues that they were having kind of got exploited. The offense sputtered a lot in that first half. There really wasn't a whole lot to go off of offensively. Our guys, our playmakers, they didn't. The ball just wasn't in their hands. We weren't able to get the ball to them very often at all. At least in the first half of that game. That very potent, prolific Washington pass attack just ate us alive. I mean, it just ate us alive for whether it was one thing or another. There were times where our guys were absolutely 100% in the right position. Penix just being absolutely surgical with it, putting it in the only place where his guy can grab it. And that was going on. That was going on all game. Very, very, very happy with how the season went. I think kind of a segue into the last thing we'll kind of talk about here is I think the timing of how all of this worked out, obviously first year in the SEC, returning the commodities that we're returning for a first year in the SEC. I think things are kind of aligned in a good way for Texas. Obviously, there are big losses. There are huge losses. The main sort of core pass catchers from this past 2023 season are gone. Your Jordan Whittington, your Xavier Worthy, A.D. Mitchell, Jatavian Sanders, all of them gone. Congratulations to them, outstanding careers at University of Texas. And Sark just absolutely having his way with the transfer portal. Quite literally just reloading that entire room. Isaiah Bond, Matthew Golden, Silas Bolden, all these guys that kind of help bolster and kind of act as a little bit of a booster for that room. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Jonte Cook, who I think is going to be a very, very important part of this Texas passing attack this coming season. Very excited. I mean, that side note, Jonte Cook is probably my personal favorite receiver in his respective class. I believe it was that 2020. Well, he was a true freshman this year, so that 2023 class. One very interesting, very curious kind of subtopic, kind of interesting little dynamic that I'm really going to be interested to see how this kind of plays out is the types of receivers that ultimately we've landed out of the portal. Once again, Isaiah Bond, Silas Bolden, Matthew Golden, those guys, all of which being kind of your speedsters. You go back to this past 2023 season when, you had Worthy, who was your, get the ball to him in space, he'll make it happen. A.D. Mitchell, your go up and get it type of receiver, and your Jordan Whittington, which was your safety outlet and heavy in the blocking game as well. Whereas now it's speed here, speed there too, and I'm very, very curious to see what Steve Sarkisian's, if you're going to see him go into a little bit more of that, sink more into that 2020 Alabama, 2019 Alabama era where he had almost nothing but speed at the receiver position. Very curious to see that, as well as with the addition of Amari Niblack out of the portal as well from Alabama. Very curious about that as well, because once again, you're not talking about your prototypical inline tight end. You're looking at more of a receiving threat. I think we're going to see a fairly healthy dose, hopefully, between Gunnar Helm and Amari Niblack. Very, very excited and happy that we were able to kind of reload that room. We're talking about a Steve Sarkisian offense here, so it needed to happen, obviously. And then returning, like I said, returning the people that you return on the offensive line, especially, pretty much everybody. I mean, you're talking about only Christian Jones being the only guy that is going on to the NFL draft, right tackle, Christian Jones. Congratulations to him on an outstanding career at Texas. Very, one of your guys that, once again, had been there for a very long time and had seen, the lowest of the lows and, was able to come back. So, in his place, you're assuming it's a Cam Williams that kind of fits that role. I do wonder if they maybe utilize Hayden Conner as a little bit of a cross-train, maybe. I know that he is capable of playing tackle. You wonder if they maybe split reps briefly there and maybe have a Neto Umeozulu fill in at that left guard position for Hayden Conner and see what happens at the right tackle. Not to say that it necessarily needs to happen, but don't necessarily be surprised if it doesn't. Your Jake Majors, of the world coming back for another year. Again, going against these very big SEC defensive linemen, you're going to need it. You're going to need it. You need you need guys like that. Kelvin Banks obviously entering the third year, his third year, money year for Kelvin Banks. Just a guy like that, having a guy like that, just a future first rounder, pretty much no doubt, probably. Having a guy like that back again, this will be his junior year, so Very, very excited for that. And DJ Campbell, kind of seeing the light kind of turn on for him throughout the course of this past season. Just, sometimes you see him just mowing guys over, especially in the run game. So I'm really excited about what we return there on the offensive line. Quinn obviously is the big one. Is the big one that I think. Look, I think what's funny about that is I think you see obviously on Twitter people say all kinds of things on Twitter, but I think there's a lot of people that didn't want to see Quinn come back, and I can't understand that. I can't see why you wouldn't want a vet going into your first year in the SEC to kind of help everybody around him. Because this is how I look at it. This is kind of how I've seen this dynamic work out, and this is something I'm going to be looking forward to going into next season. I think these past 2 years, I think you've seen dudes around Quinn. Your Xavier Worthies of the world, your Jordan Whittington, Jatavian Sanders, and a guy, an addition like A.D. Mitchell this past season. Guys that are up here, and Quinn, with his talent level, can be up here, but these guys that are up here having to make Quinn have to elevate his game to up here and match them, I think was something that helped him a lot. They kind of acted, I don't want to say as a crutch, but they absolutely helped elevate his game. And I think that's something that now is going to fall on Quinn's shoulders as it pertains to a guy like Jonte Cook, as it pertains to these younger guys, these younger talent that's around him. Now, Quinn is the guy that's, okay, he's up here, everybody come match him, everybody elevate to him. So that's kind of a cool dynamic that I'm going to be very excited to see kind of play out, to see how that goes. At the running back position, and then we'll move on to defense here for very briefly. At the running back position, first of all, hats off to Jonathan Brooks. Like I said a second ago, congratulations to him, and wishing him only the best in the NFL draft and in his career. Returning, obviously, C.J. Baxter, Jaden Blue, guys that really, seriously stepped up this year. I think a guy like C.J. Baxter is interesting because I think a lot of people kind of got hung on to the fact that he kept kind of getting banged up. It seemed like almost every game you kind of saw him like limping off the field, and you're like, man, this guy's fragile, and you're like sitting there like, no, he's a true freshman. He's an 18-year-old kid who barely has any college reps under his belt. Kind of tossed into the fire, and I just say give him another year. Give him another year under Teray Becton's kind of strength and conditioning program, and see how that kind of plays out. Get some more bulk and cushion on his body to be able to take those blows that that the SEC is going to have for him. So I'm excited about him. I want to talk about Jaden Blue for a second. What I like so much about Jaden Blue and what he kind of has to offer is just that change of pace. Obviously, that he brings. Obviously, being a speedster, kind of your darty kind of running back. Very, very excited about him and proud of him kind of stepping up in the absence of Jonathan Brooks. Kind of moving up in the pecking order, and offering that change of pace. So those two, that kind of 1-2 punch, very excited for that because, especially with that returning offensive line, having those guys blocking for you, it can only result in good things, I hope. Moving on to the defense very briefly here. I think the elephant in the room, almost quite literally the elephant in the room, your Byron Murphy and your Tavondre Sweat, deciding to declare for the NFL draft. Rightfully so. Those guys didn't need any more college reps, to be completely honest. They're gonna go off and probably have very successful NFL careers. But fact is, as far as Texas goes, we're gonna have to figure out what happens there. On the defensive line, because obviously you return a guy like Alfred Collins, you return your Vernon Broughtons, but those guys, I think you really, as Texas fans, going as far back to, I think Alfred Collins was in that 2020 class, if my memory serves me right. I think Texas fans have been waiting for the light to kind of click on for him, and I think it really, really, really started to happen this past season. So seeing him kind of really, really take hold of that offense or defensive line, and as Vernon Broughton we've been seeing flashes of him for the past 2 years. Just seeing flashes of him. He's going to be a guy that's really seriously going to have to step up, because at that point, past that, you're talking about your younger guys in the room. You're looking at your Sadir Mitchells of the world, Aaron Bryant, Jere Bledsoe, those guys that are very, very talented, but let's face it, younger, and they probably don't. They need some time, especially going into the SEC. They need a little bit of time to be able to kind of grow and kind of hone in on their craft. Obviously, just recently, Texas added the addition of the Arizona defensive lineman Tali Sevilla, with Jim Nancy coming over from Arizona as well. So adding that was big as well. I'm curious to see if they add anybody else, because I think you could go either way. I think what's going on right now is I just don't think there's anybody in the portal that this staff deems, oh, we need that guy. And when you recruit at such a high level, you kind of have the ability to kind of cherry pick and choose who you want. So I think if the right opportunity presented itself, absolutely, Texas would pursue. But I think more so, the edges. Moving on to the edges, I think I think that position is going to have to alleviate a little bit of the or is going to have to kind of pick up the slack. As it pertains to getting pressure. A guy like Barron Sorrell coming back is very big. Obviously, you have recruiting ranks. A recruit that I think everybody's excited for is obviously Colin Simmons, 5-star out of Duncanville, very highly touted recruit. And while I think he's absolutely going to see a lot of playing time this year, you need a guy like that to grow. You need guys like that still need time to grow, and adding or bringing back obviously Barron Sorrell and bringing back obviously Ethan Burke, who had really, really good moments this season when he was healthy. The addition of Trey Moore, transfer out of UTSA, another very quality transfer that can only help a guy like Colin Simmons, who you have to assume is going to gradually kind of rotate into the rotation and whatnot. Trey Moore being a guy who absolutely wreaks havoc on backfields. Very excited about him. I love his tape. I think the edge positions, I think a lot of alleviation is going to have to come from there in the absence of Tavondre Sweat, Byron Murphy. Not that I don't think Alfred Collins and Broughton and those guys are not going to be able to step up. I just think they're all going to have to kind of band together and kind of help each other out. Moving on to the secondary, where I think that is really going to be where everybody is going to have to kind of step up. Because I think what ended up happening a lot this year was you saw the defensive line, I think, alleviate a lot for the secondary when it comes to a guy like Byron Murphy shoving the center into the quarterback's lap many times, having to, speed him up, rush through his progressions, make an errant throw, take a sack, what have you. I think with this secondary and the talent that we have back there in the back end, I think it's going to have to alleviate, whether you're talking about staying in coverage for longer, giving your guys up front a chance to get home, an extra second or two to get home. A guy like Jahdae Barron announcing that he was going to return for this 2024 season was just astronomically important. All of us as Texas fans, I think all of us were just ecstatic when he announced that he was going to be coming back. He's going to be kind of the glue that's going to hold this secondary together. Adding a guy like Andrew Makuba from the portal ranks, I think that was a very big addition, especially, there were some guys that went off into the portal and whatnot, but having a guy like Andrew Makuba, a very proven commodity there over from Clemson, Derek Williams with a year 2 under his belt, Manny Muhammad with a year 2 under his belt, Terrence Brooks, who looked very solid throughout the course of the season. You saw him struggle sometimes, especially in the Washington game. But I think this secondary is probably something that I am going to be watching very, very closely, just because of how I think the dynamic is going to work out between the defensive line and the secondary this year. So very excited to see what happens there. We'll leave it off on linebacker here. First and foremost, want to congratulate Jalen Ford on an outstanding career here at the University of Texas. Just personally, I'm a huge Jalen Ford guy. Going back to like 2 years ago, before he was even starting for us. I think I was kind of banging that drum very early on. I was like, man, Jalen Ford, I think we're going to be relying on him a lot, and it absolutely happened. Replacing guys like that, the guys like that have to be replaced. You look at David Benda, who I was extremely excited that he had decided to return. I think that linebacker room needed some of that veteran experience. David Benda being one of those guys who've been around, another one of those guys who had just been around for a minute. And then past that, you're looking at maybe Leonga Lafau, who I know a lot of people are very high on, myself included. To see, I think I love that Anthony Hill saw the amount of playing time and was as successful as he was this past season, because I think all eyes are gonna kind of be on him to kind of take the reins of the linebacker room. As young as he still is, we're only talking about a sophomore here, but probably obviously the most talented person in that entire room. Right here is where we'll kind of start to wind down. Very excited. I think we're going to kind of keep the content kind of going as much as I can here, going into the offseason, keeping up with the portal news, recruiting news, and all this good stuff. Very excited, very, very excited for this 2024 season, kind of the inaugural SEC season 2024. So very excited. Be on the lookout for further content from here at Horns Behind Enemy Lines. Like I said before, give a like, leave a like down below, subscribe. Share this page with your friends and with your family. Give me a look on Twitter at Enemy Horns. I'll put that on the screen for you right here. And we will see you guys in the next one. Hook 'em.